Hello and welcome back to That Writer Guy podcast. I am your host, Lyman Raitt, and we are going to get into some super fun stuff here today. Today, we are going to start World Building Part 3, which is all about animals, creatures, beasts, and more. This one has me excited because your imagination is your limitation when it comes to any of these. But before I get into that, I want to start with some housekeeping here. World building is subjective. World building is your interpretation as to what you want it to look like, be like, feel like, see like, and act like. I actually had someone reach out to me after the last episode and express concern that I was going to be telling people it had to be a certain way. Well, I want to be clear that I want to clear all that up because under no circumstances am I the all-knowing and all-saying that it must be done my way type of person. I don't know everything, and I will never claim to it. I have built a few worlds of my own. I have helped probably a dozen friends with theirs, and that does allow me to have some experience and knowledge. But to say that I am all-knowing and my way is the best would be grossly overstated. Your world will be however you want it set up to be, and if it works for you, I won't tell you otherwise. With that being said, we're going to dive into the wonderful creation and world of animals, creatures, beasts, and more. After part 2, which was the geography of your world, has been determined and figured out, it would be cruel for it to be void of any kind of life other than humans or whatever life form you have decided will inhabit your world. Now, one of the safest things, of course, is to use animals that have already existed, and you can use them freely and widely if you wish. Just keep in mind that wherever you place things, you need to make sure they can actually live there. For example, you don't want to put a bird or a monkey or something that lives in the tropics in the snowy mountains unless they're designed to be there. Or an animal that you would never see in a geographical location that just wouldn't make sense. But unless you can viably explain why they would be there, then go for it. Your limitation is your imagination is your limitation. If you are wanting to get more creative with animals, beasts, and creatures, then the imagination is your limit. I'm going to spend the majority of the rest of the time on this episode discussing the creation of animals, beasts, and creatures because it truly is something that should be important. So, breaking this down, I'm going to start with realism. Realism, when creating a creature, beast, animal, or anything for that matter, doesn't already exist in the physical world, is vital. You need your reader to be able to visually see this thing that you have created in their mind, and it has to make sense. Or if you want it to be something that is completely insane and silly and is unreal as possible, then none of this will pertain to you. But for a larger portion of writers, the animals, creatures, and beasts that are created need to have some realistic means. I'm going to start with the anatomy of whatever creature, beast, or animal you're creating. While it might be tempting to build, say, a huge flying dragon, the wingspan needs to be proportionate to the body and overall mass. If you have a giant dragon that stands 20 feet tall but has a wingspan of only 10 feet wide, that dragon simply will not and cannot fly. It just can't. The same can be said for a dragon's body is smaller than the body. It says if the dragon's body is smaller than its wingspan and not evenly sized, the dragon will fly, but not very well. Now, I know I'm using dragons because dragons in writing dragons in a writing world generally consist of large beasts or creatures that have big wingspans, breathe fire, and are pretty terrifying. I know that I personally would not want to meet one in person if one was ever alive. However, to me, they are downright awesome. However, dragons can come in many different sizes and shapes. Think of your animal, beast, or creature, and from this point forward, I will use that term creature as something that needs 6 things: size, color, skin, sensory abilities, navigational abilities, and a name. For the size, we did cover some things just a moment ago based off of size of body to size of wings, but that isn't all. For size, you also have to think of the size of the creature in comparison to the geography and scale of your world. If you want something that towers over the trees in your world, you'll need to make sure you have a good idea of the tree sizes and the heights they can grow. That's where the geography of the world in the last episode comes into play. The same for size can also play into the creature and their abilities. I will use an example of a creature that I have in one of my worlds, and that is a Rixie. Now, a Rixie is a cat-like creature with cat-like features. However, that is about as much resemblance to a cat, other than cat-like paws, cat-like tail. Yet this creature stands 9 to 11 feet tall, is ridden by a Rixie rider, and is designed as a war creature. It wears armor, can ride for long durations of time, but the fun and most unique part of this creature is how it is controlled. Instead of being controlled by commands, it's controlled by the mind. The rider uses mind control to control the creature as well as to communicate with other riders and other Rixie. So what I did is I took a cat and made it into something much more, and hopefully this never happens in real life or we have major problems. But this is an example of a few of the points, and that is size, sensory, and navigational abilities, and the name. Creatures can be as interesting or as boring as you need them to be in your story because they can be useful or just annoying when necessary. I've used a creature to help move the story along when I couldn't think of anything else. It was like an icebreaker, and it was funny. That allowed me to keep going afterwards because it wasn't expected. Creatures of your world can also take shape from the dynamics of your world. What I mean by this is that if you're writing a fantasy, that you can anticipate some creatures are going to be of the mythological and fantastical style to be expected. This includes dragons, fairies, horses, and other flying creatures, and many more. However, if you're writing a science fiction book or something in another realm entirely, your creatures can take on the properties that fit your world. It is all of a matter of keeping the perspective of your creatures in line with the world and geography you have created. Give your creatures some unique abilities. Take a horse and give it a greater endurance, or take a monkey but give the ability to use its tail to do more than just swing around or hang around. You can take an ordinary creature and make them extraordinary by doing one or two simple things. Another creature in one of my fantasy stories is a horse. Seems simple enough, right? Yet this horse is unique in that only one type of person can ride it. Another unique feature of this horse is that when the rider and it are together, the rider can make it run at up to 7 times the speed of a normal horse, allowing it to cover distances that much faster. However, if someone that is not typically allowed to ride this horse, or is someone normal or not of that particular type of person, and they try to ride the horse, they will die from the gravitational pull the horse produces. So a horse that is a horse in many attributes is unique enough to give me another creature to work with outside of an actual regular horse. You can do this with any animal or thing that is in the human world or natural world today and create something unique. That is one thing you can truly do as a writer that is really fun. And for the next part, we will discuss creature habits. I mentioned earlier about not having a tropical bird in the snowy mountains or an animal, say a polar bear in the Mojave Desert or something to that effect. It doesn't make sense, and it can throw off your reader unless you make it make sense. Make sure that whatever you create or use in your world for creatures lives in the proper geographical location for what they are. But if you have a zoo, well, at that point you can do whatever you want. Even then, you can still do whatever you want without a zoo. It just, again, you have to make sure that your readers won't get lost or completely confused as to why a certain animal is in a certain area unless you help them understand why they're there. From here, we move into naming your creature. Now, of course, you can have horses, cows, chickens, dogs, cats, birds, dragons, all of that. But what about names for them? You can have a flying dragon like a creature from Avatar, the movie from James Cameron, called an Ikran. A crabane, which were large crows, and fell beasts, also known as hellhawks, or Nazgul birds in Lord of the Rings. The dewback, which was hidden in Tatooine in Star Wars. And the list can go on and on. Heck, I could even have the entire episode just on weird yet cool and unique creatures from different movies if I wanted to. In fact, I might even do that later on at some point. But the point I'm getting at is as this. Naming them is important. Keep in mind that the time period and setting that you are using for your world, and make sure you name them appropriately. Don't just randomly name them and not care where you got the name. For example, if you're writing in medieval times, you don't want to name something futuristic. The only way you really get away with something when it comes to a futuristic kind of name is when you're writing fantasy, because then you can make up fantasy style names for your creatures. And the last part I will touch briefly on is which side of things are the creatures on. By what I mean by this is if your world and story are set up where there are good guys and there are bad guys, good versus evil, however you want to say it or call it, adjust your creatures accordingly. Yes, they can all ride horses, have dragons, or have other various creatures, but they might have their own variations or types of creatures as well. I've touched a lot on stuff in this episode, and I hope that I was able to provide you with some information regarding animals, creatures, beasts, and more. Now, I have mentioned and more yet that I've only discussed animals, creatures, and beasts. What's the more part, you might be asking yourself? The more part is this. The more you develop your animals, creatures, and beasts, the more you will find them usable and relatable to your world. Without that, they are just something to add into the world that are, to me, filler. They don't have a purpose. They're just to fill in where the void speaks. The more time you spend on features, abilities such as magic, fire, extrasensory abilities, capabilities, or anything else, the more you will see that these might turn into something more within the story themselves. And with the other parts of world building, do not skimp on your animals, creatures, and beasts. It will be very noticeable by the reader. And that is everything I have on this part of the world building for this part. Join me again when I dive into the next topic I personally enjoy. Some others might not, and that is the people of your world in part 4 of the World Building Tour. Again, my name is Lyman, and I am your host of That Writer Guy podcast. And until we meet again, keep the words flowing, the ideas going, and happy writing.